So the first thing that I wanted to bring up today was, it looks like there's only two jobs in the NFL that are still open. We've got the Washington Commanders and the Seattle Seahawks, and it doesn't look from reports, it doesn't look like Bill Belichick is going to get either one of them. So Bill Belichick gets basically fired from the Patriots. I mean, basically that was the Patriots saying, "All right, we're moving on." They did it. They tried to do it in a graceful way, but this is what it is. So I think there's two to me major factors here why Belichick is not getting a head coaching job. Number one, I think his performance the last 3 years is making everybody a little sheepish about reaching out to him, because I think there's a thing with NFL teams where they want to hire the new young hot guy who can be there for a long time. Like that's what their goal is with coaches. So I think there's some limits to that. But I think the performance of the Patriots the last 3 years is definitely detrimental to Bill Belichick getting a job at this point. The other factor that I think is going on here is that just a self-preservation thing, where other teams, if you work in the front office of another team, like, you don't want to bring Bill Belichick in. Like, you're going to advise your owner not to hire him because you don't want somebody coming in that basically could replace you. And
Yep.
you also don't want someone coming in and that you have to listen to who's going to tell you what the team's doing, and you're going to lose all your power. And that's normal, I think, in any business. That's the way that kind of works. Somebody comes in with their own way to do things, and yeah, that's gonna drive everybody nuts. And I mean, those I think, also, uh, owners, if they were all really smart, right, none of these teams wouldn't all be losers. So a lot of these owners, I think they want to hire the coach that they want, and they want to be a part of it, which is why the Belichick going to the Cowboys thing was absolutely ridiculous. So, and then actually, there's a third thing that I was just kind of thinking about a little bit earlier. That so Belichick wants to bring in his own guys as his assistant coaches, right? He only wants to work with guys that he's worked with before. Well, who works in an NFL front office that's actually worked with Belichick? Nobody, right?
Yeah.
Because Belichick's coaching tree is terrible, right? These guys don't, even if the guys who get jobs, they don't keep them very long. See Josh McDaniels.
Right.
And so he's got, I don't think Belichick has a lot of friends out there. I think if there was a front office person working for a team that understood Belichick, that had worked with him, I think there's be a chance. But I don't think there's anybody like that, because Belichick doesn't really expand his horizons to anybody that hasn't worked with him before. So it's not a surprise to me. I would just go based on performance. Like, that's all I care about. But we all know that's not how the world works. This is all not 100% purely performance based. So I'm not surprised he doesn't have a job. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So yeah, well, like you, I'm really not surprised. I mean, one of the things that's funny to me is, you know, this is a classic example of one of the easiest takes in the world to have in sports talk radio, right? You just say this out loud, right? Belichick, greatest coach of all time, and he's looking for a job as a head coach in the NFL. Well, if you want to just be, you know, sports talk radio, uh, gas bag, then you can just go, oh, well, you got to hire him. Why wouldn't you hire him? This doesn't make any sense. And if you don't hire him, you're obviously making the wrong decision, and you're going to regret this, and this is terrible. And it's one of those takes that's just, I mean, that's what sports talk radio was made for. And so, yes, there were plenty of people out there saying, I can't believe you're doing this. He's the greatest coach of all time. You're supposed to hire him. And this doesn't make any sense. And blah, blah. Like you said, talking about the performance, I mean, Belichick, I mean, people need to understand this. And this is just something that, two things can be true at the same time. He can be the greatest coach of all time. He can also be, it can also be true that the game has sort of passed him by, and he, he's as someone in charge of personnel, he's obviously terrible, and he's been terrible not just the last 5 years. He's been terrible for a while, even dating back to the last several years with Brady. I mean, Brady was constantly complaining on the sidelines because he didn't have any receivers. He's yelling at them to get open because, I mean, he gave him Gronk and then, like, Julian Edelman, who was a quarterback in college. So, yeah, the performance has been really bad. The team just seems to be getting worse. They hired Matt Patricia to be the offensive coordinator, even though he's a defensive coach, which to me, if anybody else did that, that's a fireable offense. And think about the level of hubris that shows that, oh, well, I'm just going to hire this guy because he can do it. It'll be fine. So, and, just it seems like his inability to deal with like talented players, and the way the NFL is now, you need talent on your team. I mean, you've always needed talent on your team, but now it's like, especially on offense, you can't compete unless you have talent on your team. It becomes very, very difficult. And he hasn't really shown a willingness to adapt. I mean, how insular is that he's got his kids in New England, he had his kids on the staff. And then it's basically, I only want to work with people I want to work with, and that's the end of it. And to be honest, he's like 72. I mean, that's what happens as you get older. You just kind of get, you know what, I'm set in my ways. This is how I do things, and that's the end of it. And yeah, it's just, I think that the point you're making about he doesn't have any friends in like front offices around the league. It seems like, just from listening to a lot of different opinions about this over the course of this week, the way front offices are now, it's a collaborative thing where the coach has some say, but then you've got a general manager, you've got other people, you got analytics people in there, and we're all working together toward the same thing. Well, the Patriots have not been like that for a long time, and it's basically just been Belichick's just going to run everything, and that clearly has been an absolute disaster. So I don't understand why teams would really want to do that when it doesn't seem the league's not moving in the direction of Belichick. The league's moving in the direction of, the Chiefs or some of these, or the Rams or the 49ers, or I'm trying to think of some other examples of this, or like the Lions. They've obviously got a good thing going there between the head coach and the front office, picking out players and building a good team. And I just don't understand why, as a team, you would want to go backward. And also Raheem Morris, I mean, I think Colin Cowherd pointed this out. Who are the people speaking up for Belichick? A bunch of people spoke up for Raheem Morris. I mean, I guess Sean McVay was talking about it. And also Raheem Morris had worked in Atlanta before, so he already knew people there. So that just seems like that's kind of how things go. Like, it's, well, we know this guy from before, and he fits in well, and he interviewed really well, and he's got these other people speaking up for him. Who else are we going to hire? And plus, how long is Belichick going to be a coach anymore? He's 72. What, are you going to hire him for 3 or 4 years? He completely remakes your organization and puts it in a horrible position moving forward. That's what you want to do, just to get, I don't know, just to say you hired the greatest coach of all time, or just so he can get the record, the coaching wins record, while he's the coach of your team. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and it's kind of funny. All the things that we've been complaining about Bill Belichick and everybody else has for the last few years have all kind of come home now. It's all kind of like, oh, it's all crystallized, and now because of this is not me blaming the media. This is just the way it works. Belichick leaves Boston, and now all of the writers dump all their stories that they weren't going to release when Belichick was there. So now we're getting information that we didn't have before, where apparently the Tom Brady decision was Belichick. Robert Kraft was really ticked off that Belichick was like, no, we got to get rid of Brady. Like, he's done, he's finished. And then Brady goes to another team and wins the Super Bowl. So to me, if any, I agree with you about the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator thing. That, to me, the Brady situation right there, you should be fired on the spot for that. Like, when we have a quarterback who's capable of winning a Super Bowl, right? And you're like, no, we're not going to pay him this tremendous discount that he was giving you, where Brady was, you could have gotten Brady for half of what they're paying Mahomes. It's just, to me, that's just, I don't know how you get past that. And the fact that he's made it, 3 or 4 years after that is amazing to me. How did he make it to this point? Like, I'm not trying to be, and that's the thing. Like you said, two things can be true. Yes, he's the greatest coach of all time. That's not disputable. It doesn't mean he doesn't know how to coach. It just means right now, he's not a good candidate.
Yeah. I mean, and just think about it this way. Who do you want to hire? The old curmudgeon who's 72, who it's kind of like, well, I've got a few years left and I'll be the coach here, or do you want to hire, Raheem Morris? This is his second opportunity. He was in Tampa Bay and it didn't really work out. But now and I heard from some different people. I mean, he coached, obviously he's more of a defensive coach, but he did coach on the offensive side a little bit, I think in Atlanta when Shanahan was there. So, he's got some insight on both sides of the ball. This is his second opportunity. So, he wants to go in there and knock it out of the park because, I mean, the NFL, like you really get two opportunities to be a head coach and that's kind of it. And so with him, it's kind of like Colin Cowherd was saying this yesterday. It's kind of with Raheem Morris, it's looking forward. With Belichick, it's like, well, you want to hire him for the next few years and see if maybe things will work out. And then after that, you're going to be right back here trying to get another coach. And it's just so funny to me. It's like people thinking that the teams are going to regret this. The only way teams would regret this is if Belichick goes somewhere else and like wins the Super Bowl. Okay. I just don't really see that happening. And then it's one thing to just say, well, if they end up firing Raheem Morris in a few years, and that means it was the wrong decision. Well, no, not necessarily. Are you saying it was wrong to hire him and not Bill Belichick, or wrong to hire him and not somebody else? Like there's so many different things that go into that. And then I guess the only other thing I wanted to point out was trying to remember the other thing I was thinking of. In terms of the fireable offense, like the Brady thing, or just the Matt Patricia thing, hiring him as the offensive coordinator. Remember, I think it was last year, like in the middle of the year, the Titans played the Eagles, I think. And, the Titans had traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles. And then, the Titans played the Eagles and A.J. Brown came in there and kicked their ass. And then the GM got fired. It's like, well, you made a really bad decision. That's what ends up happening. So, yeah, that's just kind of some another example of, when you make a bad decision, oftentimes there's consequences. With Belichick, there weren't, but with everybody else, there probably would be.
Yeah, and just to finish out this topic, I mean, now we're going to have to hear for the next year when Belichick doesn't have a job. Every time a coach looks like they're in trouble, well, maybe we should hire Bill Belichick. The lazy take of it, everybody's going to espouse that. That's what's going to be said, the entire time. And then I heard this from on Bill Simmons' podcast, where he's like, "Well, Belichick will sit out a year, and then he'll have his pick of which coaching job he wants." It's like, okay, sure, he will. Like the people who believe in Belichick and want to make excuses for this, they just continue to make them. So this topic is not going to go away.
There were like what, 7 openings this year?
Yeah, 8, and 8 including New England. So he wasn't going to get
7
that,
for
7 that he had a chance
for
at.
Belichick. So
yeah,
you're telling me he's going to have his pick of jobs next year? There were 7 openings this year, and only one team interviewed him.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So I think this is ridiculous. I think he's probably done. Like nobody's going to want to say that. I think this might be it. This is you don't get to, by the way, you don't get to choose whether you're done or not. The NFL teams do. And the NFL teams are saying no thanks. So that's all I can tell you. Somebody's got to actually offer him a job in order for that to work. And I just don't know if Arthur Blank, like he wanted to do it and he couldn't get his front office guys to go along with it. That kind of worries me going forward. But anyway,